I'm Dave Bundy, editor of the Lincoln Journal-Star, and we are joined today by members of the Grow Nebraska initiative who will talk to us about Amendment 1 on the November ballot regarding using revenue to attract commercial flights to Nebraska's airports. And I know I drastically under-explained that, but I'm counting on you experts to help us out. So we'll start off with some introductions. Kent?
Yeah, I'm Kent Walgamot. I write about arts and entertainment at the paper, and I've been on the editorial board for more than a decade. So I've met with y'all several times.
But the time really just flies by. It seems like only 8 or 9 years, probably. We've also got State Senators Elliot Bostar and Luann Linehan with us, and our U.S. Congressman Mike Flood. So this is a little bit different. Usually when we're meeting with political candidates, we've got a series of questions. Here we're talking about a constitutional amendment that's on the ballot, Amendment 1. So I just am hoping I can turn it over to the three of you to talk a little bit about it, and then Kent and I may jump in with some questions. So with that, anybody want to start?
Sure, I can lead it off a little bit here. So I'll set up one of the challenges that the state is facing, and that's we are drastically underserved by commercial air service to our airports across the state. And you know, right now the aviation industry is facing some challenges, but even so, Nebraska is losing service at a rate faster than really any other state is. And so what Amendment 1 is, what the objective is to help turn that around and make sure that Nebraska can remain connected to the rest of the country, and that we have that economic development multiplier that commercial air service provides to all of our communities. And so here's the reason why we are facing this problem. There's a provision in the state constitution which prohibits the lending of the credit of the state. And that has been interpreted by an attorney general's opinion in 2020 to mean that Nebraska airports cannot enter into revenue guarantee agreements with commercial air carriers. And what a revenue guarantee agreement does is it's a partnership agreement, essentially, between a community, the airport serving community, and a particular airline. And it says that we're all invested in maintaining air service to these communities. So when an airline is looking at expanding into a certain community or a different route, which airports are constantly trying to attract them to do, there will be modeling done to determine whether or not there is sufficient projected passenger load to accommodate that service, to make it economically viable. And what a revenue guarantee agreement does is it says, okay, we've all done our modeling. We all agree that this is a good opportunity for the community and for the airline. And so we are going to invest in this together. Essentially, if the passenger service isn't there to what everyone thinks it is, the community will step in with revenue guarantees for that route, essentially helping to mitigate the business risk to the air carriers. And that is a standard practice across the country, across airlines, and across airports. So as we're competing as Nebraska to attract this service across the country against our competitors across the country, because when you're talking about the aviation industry, we're competing against everybody. We do not have this tool at our disposal that everyone else does. And so that's what we're fixing here.
Okay. Senator Linehan, Congressman Flood, how about your thoughts on this? And then one question that occurred while we were out talking in the newsroom was, are we the only state like this? I gathered from your website that we're in a very small minority, but I wasn't sure if we were the only one.
So from what we've heard, at least, in speaking to airlines as well as folks within the airport industry, it does seem like Nebraska is unique in this deficiency.
Okay.
One of the things I would add, as a former member of the Nebraska Legislature's Revenue Committee, of which we're honored to have our chairwoman here today, she can certainly speak for a little bit more. Think of this from the perspective of, in the early 80s, former senator, former mayor of Lincoln, Chris Beitler, as a member of the legislature, proposed that we had tax increment financing, and that project allowed essentially the Cornhusker Hotel to be the first in the state to use. We amended the same provision in the state constitution to allow for tax increment financing, which essentially allowed the Cornhusker Hotel to be rebuilt at that time. We're doing the same thing here, really from my vantage point, to help the Lincoln Airport attract more air carriers into the city of Lincoln and guarantee more flights in and out of Lincoln. This effort was led by Senator Bostar. It was supported by the Lincoln Independent Business Association and the Lincoln Chamber. That's where I first heard about it. I also know that this was not opposed by anybody in the committee, because it's such a common sense change that we can make to the state constitution, and we're hoping it will allow Lincoln to become a lot more competitive for a lot more of these air carriers to increase flights and take advantage. Airports like Grand Island, where they already get essential air service, they like this. Airports like Kearney, McCook, Shadron. There's a number of airports across the state that benefit from a federal program called Essential Air Service, and Lincoln does not. But Lincoln sees this, the Lincoln Airport Authority sees this as an opportunity to use existing revenues to attract flights in and out of the capital city. And so from a business standpoint, from a access standpoint, and an economic development standpoint, one of the key factors in recruiting businesses to the city of Lincoln is having these direct flights in from different parts of the country. And so that was a no-brainer, and that's why I got my support as a member of the Revenue Committee. And I'll let our chairwoman talk a little bit about her perspective, looking over the entire state on behalf of the Nebraska Legislature's Revenue Committee.
Thank you, Congressman Flood and Senator Bostar. So Senator Bostar, this was his bill. Congressman Flood was very insistent, was important. And I have been blessed the last 2 years to have a great committee. I had 2 members that came back that had been here before for 8 years. So I think we were actually able to do a lot as a committee. I'm not so thrilled that 4 of them are now, I can come back, but happy that Congressman Flood's in the Congress. This is not just important to Lincoln. Of course, being important to Lincoln means it should be important to every legislator, but it's also, as Congressman Flood said, it's important to Grand Island and to Kearney and to Shadron. If we don't have air service that goes across the state, that is not good for Nebraska's economy. And Lincoln, specifically with the growth that it's had and the trajectory of which it's on, you're going to have air service. Young people, the chambers talk constantly how we need people between 18 and 35 to live here. That group of people likes to travel. They like to go places. They want to live in apartments. Many of them don't want cars. So if you're going to attract that generation of people, you're going to have air service so they can go to the beach or go to the mountains since they're carless. This is really, I think, important to Nebraska's growth going forward.
So financially, are there things that still need to be figured out after this passes, or is there a liability or a risk or anything that people ought to be worried about? Like, how much money could we be on the hook for if, if there wasn't the demand that we expected for a particular airline?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. Thank you. So two things there. One is there are no new appropriations, there's no new taxes, there's nothing like that associated with this. The airports, and actually, you know what, I'm gonna provide the list of all the airports because we've hit a lot of them, but I just want to make sure at least in one spot there's a comprehensive list. So Omaha, but it's a little different. Lincoln, Grand Island, Kearney, McCook, North Platte, Alliance, Chadron, and Scotts Bluff. Those are all the communities and airports that will see direct benefit from this, as well as airports not on this list that could in the future take advantage of it. So to get back to your question, there's no new taxes. This is just simply to say the airport can use its existing revenues to enter into these agreements. And you touched on it with your question too, but most of the time, the modeling is correct when the airport and the airline and the community get together to evaluate a new route. So that money, that sort of insurance policy that we invest in with the airline, isn't actually utilized, right? None of it's ever spent. It's only spent if there's a shortfall. And generally, in the industry, when there's a shortfall, it's pretty minor. So that decision will be made by the airport and the airline. Also, these agreements are usually only built around the first year of service for a new route. So it's not like we're on the hook in perpetuity if, markets change 10 years from now. It's really just, okay, we did this modeling about what's happening right now. And if we're right, nothing's going to change. And if we're off by a little bit, then we're all going to put in a little bit because the benefits are still extraordinary for having expanded air service. So it's, the elected boards of the airport authorities across the state are going to be the ones to craft these contracts and these agreements. So there's always a level of public accountability within this system. So whatever those elected representatives from their communities feel is appropriate, feel is the right, mitigation of risk to attract those air carriers, that's what they're going to have the flexibility to do. It's really enhancing local control in these communities across the state.
Okay, any of the three of you can answer this one, but I'm, as the editor of a newspaper, I have no trouble attracting crabby people. And I have not attracted any crabby people about this. Is there, there doesn't seem to be an organized opposition. I don't want you to do somebody else's job, but is there an argument against this? Are there any things that concern you about it?
I'll just briefly, and if the others have some thoughts on this, they can, I hope they'll chime in. The Nebraska legislature rarely passes things unanimously. So when they do, it's a fairly, I feel comfortable saying that this is a common sense solution to a problem that our state is facing. I certainly haven't heard any opposition, gotten a lot of questions, obviously, because this is a constitutional amendment, and that's why we're here, is because we need to make sure that the public is educated about this, because this change, the state legislature can unanimously pass something to change the Constitution, but ultimately it goes to the people. And so the voters are going to have to carry this ball the rest of the way. And so, we're here, we're participating with you. We're doing a lot of events across the state to make sure that the public has the information they need to feel confident about voting for this amendment.
Okay.
I would just agree that I also tend to attract a lot of grouchy people and nobody's complained.
Okay. My
You know,
sympathies.
One of the benefits to the provision we have in the state constitution, and one of the things we're most proud of as a state, is we have a state constitution that specifically does not let the state of Nebraska go into any kind of a debt. And that is one of the real benefits to Nebraskans, that we don't have a lot of debt. In this situation, we aren't allowing the state to go into any debt. We're just clarifying that an airport can enter into agreements with air carriers using existing revenues that go beyond 1 year to help lure airlines and air carriers to cities like Lincoln, which I think it's important for people to know that this is a clarification, the same kind of clarification that's been made on behalf of utilities in the past. The same clarification that's been made in the past for programs like tax increment financing. None of those affect the state's credit. None of these, this doesn't affect the Lincoln Airport Authority's credit. It allows them to carry out, to do what every other state does without in any way jeopardizing the state constitution's bright line for maintaining almost zero debt on the state side. So I think that's an important distinction for people to know if they're reading the language in there.
Well, this has been very informative. I should double check and make sure, Kent, you can't ask any questions about water quality. Do you have any other questions?
Just to clarify, there's no requirement that any of these airports take advantage of this. It's just creates an option for them that doesn't now exist.
Correct. It would provide a tool that every other state has access to the elected boards of directors of airport authorities, the ability to use this. But no, we're not creating contracts in this constitutional amendment.
All right, well, I feel like we have been well informed on Amendment 1, and I appreciate it. Do any of you have any other, final thoughts, anything you'd like to add?
We would certainly appreciate the Lincoln Journal-Star's support of Amendment 1 as it informs, the residents of our state and those that are going to participate in the election coming up in November. We'd appreciate any support and assistance you can provide in ensuring that the public has that education to feel like they're making an informed decision on this.
All right, well, we will make sure that the rest of the editorial board gets the treat of watching this. They knew we were going to be doing this, and we're pretty well grounded in it before, but this has been very helpful. So thank you very much for your time today. And for those of you who are campaigning, we wish you the best, and we wish the best for the rest of our lawmakers on here too. So thanks a bunch.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.